Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. It's Christina from Our Home. In today's video I'm going to be making lilac jelly. I'm not going to give an exact recipe in the voiceover part of this video, but I will be writing it out for my blog and I will put the link for that in the description of this video so you can check that out for exact quantities. But I'll still walk you through what I'm doing just so you have kind of a rough idea. I just picked a few branches of lilacs and I'm washing them off just to get off any bugs or dirt or spider webs, and then I'll let those drain for a little bit before pulling off the flowers. It's okay to get a little bit of the green part, but we want mostly the flower, not so much the green or any stems. There's not really a trick to pulling them off. You kind of just give it a quick tug and it should come off pretty easily. These lilacs weren't fully bloomed, they weren't fully opened, so you can see a lot of closed up ones, and I'm still using those in this recipe. We're making jelly today, so that means we're going to be making a tea of sorts using these flower petals. We're going to cover them in hot water and let that water infuse with the flavors of the lilac so we get a really nice, strong tasting jelly. I used about 1 cup of petals for this recipe, and then I boiled 2 cups of water and poured that over and let it steep. I did put a plate over top just to keep all the steam in, or as much as possible. My recipe is different from other jelly recipes because I don't use a traditional pectin source like a boxed pectin or a liquid pectin. Instead, I'm using fruit which has naturally high levels of pectin, so I'm going to be adding in 2 dried lemon slices to this mixture. They're dried because that's what I have, but you could use fresh lemon slices instead. I'm just going to try to get it submerged so that it fully hydrates and releases all of that lemon juice, and I let it sit for about half an hour all together in this liquid. After that, I did something that might seem kind of strange, but it seems to have worked the best when I've tried making this jelly before. I'm going to take this whole mixture, the water and the solids, and put it in a blender. And then just blend that up until it's smooth. It's going to look strange, it's going to look very bubbly and frothy, but that's okay. We'll just strain it out after it's been blended, and it's going to be this really nice pink colored liquid. Now I'm going to take the 2 cups of liquid here and combine that with 2 cups of white sugar. I'm going to put that in a large pot and bring it to a boil. Typically, jelly recipes that require commercial pectin need a lot of sugar to help them set up quickly. That's how the pectin is designed to work. I would say that 2 cups of sugar here is a lot, but compared to other jelly recipes where you often use more sugar than liquid, I would say this is pretty reasonable. And of course, you're not going to be eating an entire jar of jelly in one sitting, so I think the sugar content here, personally for me, is fine. Without this much sugar, this jelly would taste not quite as good. I think it tastes the perfect amount of sweet. I was a little bit worried that the lemon would be too overpowering, but it is not at all. We're going to set this on the stove and turn the burner on to high. We want it to get to a good rolling boil. Now, we're not going to cook the jelly on high this whole time. I'm using a new candy thermometer that we used for maple syrup. making. And this one is very easy to read. So I'm going to give it a try and see if it works better than my other candy thermometers, which are not accurate. But what we're going to do is put our candy thermometer in, and when this thermometer reads 220 degrees Fahrenheit, that will have reached the gelling point and the jelly should be set. I usually use a higher gelling point, but I'm going to give it a try with this thermometer and see how it works. Once the liquid has started to boil, we're going to turn it down to a medium or a low heat. This is too much of a boil that we don't want it to be on consistently. We want it to just be a gentle boil, or even just a gentle simmer like this. It's kind of hard to see, but there's still some bubbles. It's just not as much of a rolling boil, I would say. We're going to just keep an eye on this. We don't want it to burn, so we're going to be stirring it often. This is an even better example of what it should look like. There's still some bubbles, and it's thickening up as we've been cooking it. As you can see, we've got lots of small bubbles. Usually that means the jelly is almost at the gelling point. And if we look at the candy thermometer, it's kind of hard to see. Oh, there we go. We are almost at 220, which is the gelling point. I believe it's at maybe 218, 219. It's hard to tell without getting too close to it. But I could tell that it was almost ready just by how it feels when I'm stirring it. So it feels a little bit thick. It's not just liquid. It feels like there's some resistance. As you can see, we are now at 220 Fahrenheit, so we've reached the gelling point. I'm going to turn off the stove so that it doesn't continue to keep cooking while I get my jars set up. I did not specifically can this jelly in this video because I made such a small amount, so we're going to go through it quickly. But if you wanted to can it, I would say for this size of jar, these little jelly jars, you would put it in a steam or a water bath canner for 15 minutes if you are not at a specifically high elevation. If you are at a very high elevation, let me know in the comments and I will send you the proper processing time. I'm pouring the contents of the pot into a large measuring cup instead of using a ladle to scoop out from the pot, because this is just going to be so much easier for me since the measuring cup has a handy pouring spout. I don't do this with large quantities, but for something that's in a small quantity, this just works best for me. I let my jars sit undisturbed for 24 hours just to make sure that they sealed, and then I popped one open to see what it looks like. Is it set? Is it jelly? I would say this is not quite jelly, to be perfectly honest. It's more like a thick syrup. So what I decided to do was see how it holds up in the fridge, because in the past when I've made some jellies, they get refrigerated and then turn into a very, very thick, almost unspreadable substance. So I put it in the fridge and I'll show you what it looks like a little bit later in this video. But I'm still going to call this a success. I think it looks great and it tastes amazing. I did make a classic jelly mistake by pressing down on the petals and the lemon peel after it had been blended up. It's not good to squeeze out the solids because then you can get a little bit of cloudiness or some small particulate in your jelly. Personally, this does not bother me, but if it bothers you, I would suggest not squeezing it or just doing a double layer of fabric over the strainer. Now, this is the jelly after it's been sitting in the fridge for a while. You can see it's much thicker. I wouldn't say it's typical jelly, but it's got a bit more substance and it spreads pretty nicely on some toast. I admit this looks a little bit clumsy because I'm using my one hand and I can't hold the toast while I'm also spreading the jelly, but I think you get the idea. It spreads nicely, and most importantly, it tastes great. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you found it interesting and are encouraged to try making some lilac jelly for yourself. I will have the full recipe on my blog, which will be linked in the description of this video. Let me know if you knew that lilacs were edible. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this recipe and lilacs just in general. This jelly I think is so good because it tastes exactly the way fresh lilacs smell. It's going to be amazing spread on toast, maybe with a little bit of butter. You could also spread it over top of a plain cake and make it kind of an infusion of lilac flavor. Let me know what other ways you might use this jelly. Again, thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day.